This ESPN podcast is brought to you by Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. Visit geico.com.
The BS Report is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects.
First of all,
this is the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
It might be cool, I don't know. And if it's not, I don't care.
The BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Bill Simmons works for ESPN. He's also named the Sports Guy, and he writes a comical sports column. He must be a popular dude.
The BS Report.
It's got a real dirty sound, like a rusty steak knife cutting through a well-aged steak.
Now.
Here's Bill Simmons.
Welcome to the BS Report, taping this on a Thursday afternoon. It's running Friday. Our old friend Steve Kerr has not been on for a while. He's been busy. He's been doing college. He's been doing NBA. He's all over the place. I thought you did broadcasting because you didn't want to be that busy.
That's a good point. We have a stretch from the time the NCAA tournament starts till about June 1st that is kind of crazy. And it's almost 3 months. And during that time, I'm traveling constantly. The nice thing, though, is that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, we get through the conference finals and we're done. I've got the whole summer completely to myself. So that's the payoff. But, yeah, it does get a little crazy at the end of the season. So
at what point are you going to really dive into what happened here with Arizona and Sean Miller? Like, do you don't really have your full time to focus on what an outrage that was? Do you wait till this summer to really freak out about that? How does that work?
Are you talking about the officiating thing?
Yeah.
Oh, I've already read all about it. And I mean, I don't know what you can do about it. It seems like they should at least give him his money back.
Yeah, you would think. I mean, first of all, I don't know how Ed Rush didn't get fired for that whole thing.
Yeah, I thought he would get fired.
Sure seems like he should be fired when you combined what he claims didn't happen, but what other people said did happen, and then what actually happened in that game.
Yeah,
pretty shady.
And I've tried to read more about it, and I read today that one of the Pac-10's best officials actually quit before this even happened, and because of what he called differences with the officiating leadership in the league. So Ed Rush has definitely ruffled some feathers and gotten himself in some trouble, and it'll be interesting to see what Larry Scott does, if he just stands by his current decision or if it goes any further.
Would you say the University of Arizona fan base, pretty benevolent fan base for the most part, right? It's all people who went to school in Arizona, like not crazy. Like I feel like if this had happened to like the Syracuse fan base, the world would be ending right now.
Maybe. I mean, Arizona fans are really passionate, but yeah, maybe not as nuts as, some fan bases. I would think that over time, I mean, this would kind of just blow over for Arizona fans, but maybe that's just me. I mean, I think there's enough stuff in sports that happens like this that you just, you kind of just shake your head and trust that something will come of it in terms of improving the structure of the officiating development in the league and the leadership. But I don't know. I mean, I think we'll all be following it and seeing what happens from here. It would be disappointing if nothing happened at all. That's for sure.
There seems to be a sense of rudderlessness about the NCAA right now. And even like during the games, I thought it was interesting. You and Marv did a great job on that, the Michigan-Kansas game, which was a really, this has been a lousy tournament for the most part. That game was awesome. And that was like the kind of game that I grew up watching March Madness. But, you were talking about this weird instant replay rule that just grinds everything to a halt.
Yeah.
And just like what really is the upside to even having this? And it just got me thinking, like, in general, have we taken technology too far? Yeah, I see it in the NBA too. It's the same thing. Like, yeah. Is there too much of this now?
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a game in Golden State early this season. I think it was Denver and Golden State, and every possible replay scenario that you could have in the final 20 seconds actually happened, one after another. And each one is, in its own right, was very justifiable. Who did the ball go off of? Was the guy's foot on the line or behind the line when he went up for the three-pointer? Another play, who did the ball go off of? But it all happened one after the next, and the end result was, and the final one was Iguodala hit a game-winning shot that was then had looked at to see whether he got it off in time. So there were, I think, 4 stoppages in play in the last 20 seconds, and the referees got each one right. And at the end of the game, I looked at Marv and I said, "Do we like instant replay or not?" And,
I don't know.
I didn't really like it. I think the flow and the pace of the game, whether it's college or the NBA, is so important. But it's a really tricky dilemma because you do want to get it right. But I think there's a balance that the NBA has found that the college game has not. Usually at the NBA level, it's done pretty cleanly. But the collegiate level, everything is looked at. Although, ironically enough, not out of bounds calls, which is the most important thing. Who the ball touched last. They don't look at that. But these end game situations where a team may not want a timeout, maybe they want to push the ball ahead, and then the game stops, or maybe the opposite is true. Maybe they don't have any timeouts left, and the game is stopped, and they get a free timeout. I think the integrity of the game is compromised because of the stoppages.
Almost seems like maybe put a time limit on it, and there's some alternate ref that would have just 20 seconds to look at the replay and just make a quick decision, just to make sure nothing crazy happened.
That's his job, and just have him make the decision and keep going, move on.
Yeah. You just move on quick, and it's like a 20-second timeout. Yeah. In general, it seems like we talk about this every year. This year, the quality of play with the tournament, I thought was especially bad, and some players stood out. But we had Chuck Klosterman on a podcast that ran yesterday. We're taping this today, so we did it today, but it ran yesterday. And he was saying, is it time maybe to think about some possible rule changes, because the defense has gotten so good in the college level that it's really kind of compromised the offense to points that we might need to help it out. What do you think there?
Well, one of my buddies, I'm here in Atlanta now. One of my buddies went to the Hawks-Knicks game last night, and I said, "How'd the game go?" He goes, "Well, it was great. It was so fun to see the ball actually go in the basket." And it's so true. At the college game, the ball rarely goes in, and you have to ask yourself why. I mean, it wasn't always that way, and I think there's so many factors. And one that's sort of inevitable is that the one and done means you don't have the stars at the college game level.
Yeah.
But two is, I think, just the style of play that's sort of developed over the years, and I think it's gotten really physical. I think it's very defensive-minded. I think it's very controlled. But having watched a ton of college basketball now the last few years, my feeling is that the officiating is fine. I think, they make mistakes like all refs do. I think the officiating is fine. It's the rules that have to change. And I can think of probably 10 things off the top of my head that I would like to see altered to make the game better. It's really glaring when you watch it over and over again. There are certain rules that, get rid of the after-made basket timeout. You got to get rid of that. And I know coaches call it to set up their defense, but it takes away from the flow. The under 16, 12, 8, and 4, those timeouts that are automatic, they're not offset if a coach calls a timeout just before the 16, 12, 8, or 4. So you get the double timeout.
So you think the flow is a part of this then?
Oh, the flow is horrible. The game is so choppy. And so the timeout situations are really out of kilter, and they need to revamp those. But I can go on. There's literally 8 or 10 things that I see every game that I go, God, they've got to change that. But to this point, there really hasn't been a push to do so. Well,
the stupid charge rule has got to be one of them, right?
Yeah, I don't like the charge, the restricted area anyway, no matter where it is. But if you're going to have it, it can't be that close to the basket. But the biggest thing is, Yeah, I think you have to penalize a defender for sliding underneath the guy.
Me too.
And we're rewarding players, especially at the college level. We're rewarding guys for sliding underneath the offensive player, and that's a pretty simple one. You just really go over with the refs and decide we're going to reward the offensive player. And part of the restricted area, part of the problem is that the officials end up looking at the guy's feet, and they don't look at the offensive player and who really has position, and whether the offensive guy went up before the guy got there. It puts the refs in a bad spot, because how do you look at the feet and the offensive player at the same time? To me, it needs to be more of a judgment call, and the benefit should go to the offensive guy.
I feel the same way about the NBA. You want to reward offensive guys for trying to get to the basket and doing something creative, and you don't want to make them not only be afraid of getting a charge, but be afraid of getting hurt.
Yeah, that's true.
And you know who I blame for this? Jason Kidd. I really feel like he was the first one who had mastered the sliding under the guy right as they're jumping up in the air move. Was somebody from your era, do you remember somebody doing that before him? Because I really feel like he was the first one.
Oh boy. I don't really remember any one particular guy.
I think he invented it. I really do. I think he was the first one. I remember him doing it on the Nets to the Celtics and being like, wow, is that legal? How is he doing that? And he was supernaturally good at figuring out exactly when to hop in front of somebody and stop.
I really think that if you took the arc away, the restricted arc away, it would actually make things easier. And I don't know, maybe if we talk to officials, they would say differently. But I really feel like when I'm watching a game, I can kind of tell if the offensive guy is out of control and barges in there, I can kind of tell that it's a charge. Whereas if it's really close and the defender slides underneath there, it just feels like a block. It seems like it should be more of a feel call instead of trying to make it exact by putting this arc in there, because there's too many variables, and the arc takes the attention of the official away from what's really happening in my mind.
Would you do a 24-second shot clock or 25?
I would do 30.
30.
I like in the college game, I like that you've got a little more time to run your offense. The players aren't as talented. You probably need more time to be able to set screens and run different action. But 35 seems too long.
Seems primitive.
Yeah.
Maybe 30, but then you have the NBA rule where you have to get it over in 8 seconds.
And the other rule you have to change on that front is right now a team can take 9 seconds and then call a timeout in the backcourt, and then the count restarts. That needs to change. You have to do what the NBA does, which is whether it's 8 or 10, you've got to at least just keep the count where it is, and then they only have a second or two to get it over. But the flow is a big thing. The timeouts, the after made basket timeout it just drives me nuts. It's to me, when the ball goes through the hoop, you don't have possession anymore, and so you should not be allowed to call timeout if it's the other team's ball. And it's probably the biggest source of interruption in the game in the second half of all these games, along with the automatic timeouts that are slotted and not offset like they are in the NBA. So
when I become the czar of sports, it sounds like I should make you my college basketball consigliere, because you put a lot of thought in how to improve the game.
If I'm unemployed at the time, I will jump at the opportunity. You know what? Doing these games has been so much fun. I love the tournament. I love college basketball. I love the passion, the bands, the format of the tournament. It's spectacular. It really is. But right now, the quality of play is suffering for a lot of reasons, and I do think there's things we could do to improve it. And that's all I'm really thinking about is how can we get this better? Because it's already great just by the nature of college sports. It's fantastic, but we can make it better.
You mentioned the one and done and how the not having star players is a big part of this, and I agree. But the other part of the one and done that nobody really mentions, when you have teams that have stayed together for 2 years, 3 years, and guys overlapping, and you were a freshman playing with the senior, and then you play for 3 years, and your teammates below you have played for 2, there's a continuity just from playing basketball with other people every day that and you start to know their strengths and their weaknesses and where they like the ball. And collectively you just get better. And I think that's what's missing more than anything with college is you have these guys that basically they're like ships that pass in the night for 5 months and they never see each other again. And I don't think that's how basketball works.
I agree. And you even see it at the pro level. I mean, think of the teams that have continuity. Look at the Spurs. I mean,
oh yeah,
they're so good because they're together year after year. And obviously at the collegiate level, it can't last for that long, but it used to be that, the top teams, even if you think back to was it 2009 that Carolina had that really dominant team with Hansbrough?
Yeah.
I mean, they were incredible, and part of that was they grew together. They were really talented, but they grew together, and they had that continuity. And that's when you develop that magic that is impossible to describe, which is really at the core of the beauty of the game itself. It's not, one play. It's the sequence of plays that happens over time because of a group of guys who are really familiar with each other and with their coach. That's where the game is beautiful, and that's something that has been lost. Although, you can also argue that that's why Butler got to the final game 2 years ago, because they had that.
Yeah.
But you're not seeing it very often with the ultra talented teams that would otherwise, become dominant eras. Like that Kentucky team from last year could have won 4 in a row, maybe.
Right. Well, it's interesting. Like you played on a team where the two guys, Jordan and Pippen, had reached a point where they just knew each other so well. And it was like their knowledge of one another made you guys better, better than you should have just been on paper, because those two played so well together and they played so well off of each other. And then we saw that again. I think that was one of the biggest reasons Miami won the 27. We're in year 3 now where LeBron and Wade and Spoelstra knowing how to coach them and just everything. There was a familiarity and a camaraderie and just a collectiveness to that team that they did not have those first 2 years. You agree with that? You and I were at the Boston-Miami game 2 years ago, the very first game of the Big Three. Yeah. And they looked so awful offensively. It was, they had no idea how to play with each other. And that lasted, for a while. They ended up getting to the finals, but that team ultimately couldn't get it done because they were a collection of individuals and they were, trying to navigate their way through. Fast forward to now, and they're a machine, and it's beautiful to watch. The ball moves. They know their roles. They've, the coaches have done an incredible job of, redefining what they're trying to accomplish. And that's the beauty of it. And that's the evolution of a team that you don't see as often anymore at the college level because of guys jumping. And I actually think Shaq and Kobe could have had that, and that was the big tragedy of what happened with those guys. And they had it a little bit in 2001, right? Like,
they had it for. I mean, they won 3 straight.
Yeah, but the third year was like they were like this married couple that hated each other. You know what I mean? Like in the 01 playoffs, they went 15-1. They only lost one game 1 of the 2001 finals to Philly. They lost in overtime. They ran over everybody in that postseason. It seemed like they're going to own the rest of that decade. And, Miami went in the 27. You're probably one of the best people I could think to even ask this question. Overrated, underrated, or properly rated for you?
Well, it was. I think it's one of the all-time great streaks in NBA history. It's.
Well, it was the second longest, but I mean.
But I mean, when I say streaks, I should have said feats. It's one of the all-time feats.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just incredible to summon that kind of motivation and resolve and energy, just night after night after night. Against the best players in the world. And, the streak almost ended several times against some of the worst teams in the league. I mean, Sacramento had them when they had won 10 in a row. That Cleveland game was amazing when it was at about 24 or whatever. But that's the thing about the NBA is even if you're playing a lousy team, they have great players, and great players can get hot. And with all the travel and the wear and tear and the really the lack of importance as in terms of the big picture that some of those games really represented for them to just bring it every single night and kind of that streak was kind of took on a life of its own, and it was one of the coolest things I've seen ever in the NBA because they just cared so much about it. It was amazing to watch.
Yeah, I wrote like 6,400 words about it on Friday, and a couple people were like, "Come on, that streak was overrated." I'm thinking like, overrated? Like, yeah. I'd be the first one to admit if ESPN was exaggerating something or too much hyperbole or whatever, because I think I think everybody in sports tends to do that from time to time. But that streak was not overrated.
No, it wasn't overrated. You know what it reminded me of, and you'll remember this very well, when Pete Rose was chasing Joe DiMaggio.
Yeah.
He eventually got to about 44, I think, before it was broken. And this was before the days of the 24-hour news cycle. But that was such a big deal. And Rose made an unbelievable effort. He was, bunting his way on in the ninth inning. And it was just so cool just to see it, over time. And I felt like I was kind of watching the same thing, like an unbreakable record that's actually being threatened by an amazing effort and passion for what somebody was doing. That was awesome. I thought it was great.
You played on the team that probably had the best chance to do that, and
we didn't even come close.
I was gonna say, like, was it even on the radar? Did you even think like 33 was an option?
No. I think the most we got to was like 18 or 17. I'm not sure exactly, but that was never even discussed. Although we never really discussed 70 either. It just
really?
sort of,
you never talked about it?
Not until the end of the season. Not until I remember we had a meeting and maybe with about 3 weeks left in the year, and Phil said, everybody's talking about this 70 stuff. He said, what I think would be really cool is if we had single-digit losses for the season. That would be awesome. He just sort of threw it out there, like challenging, a 73-9 finish.
Wow.
And but to that point, really, we never really. Everybody else talked about it, but we didn't. And then when we got there, we beat Milwaukee for the 70th win. And that was a pretty cool deal because you always drive to Milwaukee if you play for the Bulls. You just take a bus up there, and we had helicopters following the bus, and it was like, just this crazy amount of scrutiny and media attention, and we pulled it off, and that was a fun night.
Part of me wonders if anybody had even thought to tell Jordan that it's impossible to win 33 again if he would have just. Right? If he would have gone on a bender and tried to get it, right?
He might have, yeah.
Like if you had had like 17 in a row, if Sam Smith or somebody had gone into the locker room and said, "Hey, MJ, you're only halfway to the 72 Lakers. There's no way you'd ever break that. I'll bet you $5,000 you don't break that record." He might have broken it.
Just dangle the carrot.
Yeah.
He might have done it.
Because I do think like the thing that impressed me the most about the streak, and Lord knows LeBron's had enough smoke blown up his butt this year, but what he brought to the table game after game was really, what we've only seen from a handful of great guys ever. Like just the fact that night after night being able to come through, doing all the things he did on both ends, it was like he finally realized everything I ever wanted him to be as a basketball player.
Yeah. I remember you wrote a column like 3 or 4 years ago that you were kind of expressing your, I think, I was going to say disgust, but that's probably too strong. More disappointment that LeBron had not figured out, like, you got to bring it every night. Is that right? Did you write something about that?
Yeah, I think it was when I wrote about how he was given the car wash package. When you get your car washed, that they have that one package that you can basically get everything in the car wash. And he was the one guy of this generation who God, for whatever reason, said, this is the guy who's getting the car wash package. And he didn't seem like he was taking care of it. Yeah.
Now he's taking care of it.
Yeah. And I think that what he's done with his low post game, and Kirk Goldsberry did a great job of breaking it down on Grantland. He really has changed his game offensively and gotten rid of all the superfluous stuff and concentrated on the stuff that just helps them win.
Yeah.
And also the way he uses his teammates, there's just nobody really like him.
Yeah.
In that respect either. It would be the most fun guy to play basketball with, right? Who would be more fun than him?
Yeah. he's right at the top of the list for sure. And I think Spoelstra deserves a ton of credit too. I mean, they've completely changed the way they've approached the game. They looked around the league. They realized there was nobody that big that they had to worry about. And even though they fell into it by accident when Bosch got injured last year, they ended up kind of changing the dynamics of the way the game is played now, with Bosch playing 5 and playing Battier at the 4, and that gives LeBron all that room, and they've really sort of incorporated so much ball movement and spacing that they're like impossible to cover. If they're making their threes, there's just not much you can do. But I give Spoelstra a ton of credit. He's a great coach, and he probably doesn't receive, I think, enough recognition.
I got to give Tom Haberstra from ESPN.com credit, because he told me this early in the year. He said, I was like, what's Spoelstra doing? Like, why is he really not just going to play a center this year? And he basically laid it out. Like he feels like, and this is, Spoelstra had said this publicly. He was like, he felt like he had this player in LeBron that was just such a special, unique player. He was kind of angry at himself that he didn't use him the way that maybe he should be used. And he's like, you know what? I'm going to roll the dice this year and just try to build this team around what he does.
Yeah.
And I don't know if a lot of coaches would have done that. The other irony is he would have been fired if they lost Game 6 in Boston, and he goes from you're on the scrap heap if you lose that game to now I am so emboldened by that title. I get, screw it. I'm going to go for history now and try to create this awesome team that nobody's seen before.
Yeah. I don't know that he would have been fired. It seems like Riley is very, very loyal to Eric, and that's kind of allowed it. Maybe he would have. I don't know.
I think he would have.
Well, I do know one thing, and I saw this with Greg Popovich. When a coach wins a title, it's like he can now be himself, and he's got license to just be himself and experiment and coach and do things, try things that maybe he wouldn't have tried before. And I think it's amazing to watch. Greg Popovich, from 10 years ago to now, the team plays totally differently. He's so much more relaxed in a lot of ways. He gives his team a lot more freedom, but he's adapted to the rules and the personnel changes. But once he won that first title, and I was there in 99, it was like the true coach in him came out. And I think that's the relief that guys get once they get over that hurdle and they're beyond the scrutiny of all the people like you and me and the owners and the fans and everybody else.
Were you disappointed when the Bulls beat Miami?
It was really interesting. It was almost like, and my brother actually gave me this great analogy. He goes, every year when the Yankees are in the playoffs, I root against them. But as soon as they lose, I'm really disappointed because now I can't root against them anymore.
Right.
And he compared it to like the cat playing with the mouse. As soon as the mouse is dead, it's no fun anymore. It's better when the mouse is alive. I was rooting against Miami, like when I was watching the Cleveland game. It was so inspiring to see what the Cavs were doing, and I was kind of thinking, this is great. Like the Cleveland fans, it's almost like karma. They lost LeBron, but at least they get this moment, So then they lose, and Miami comes back and wins, and so at that point I was kind of like, well, gosh, this would be awesome. Let's get to San Antonio and see if they can get to 29 or whatever the number is. But for a while, I was kind of rooting against them, and then when it ended, I was really disappointed. I realized, man, I wish they had done it, or at least gotten even closer.
The Bulls game was the first time I actually rooted for them during the streak.
Yeah.
And I just because I wanted to get to the San Antonio game.
Yeah.
I was so fired up for that game. I really was. I was just so excited for it. And as it turned out, the Bulls game, I made the case. I thought it was the greatest regular season game I'd ever seen. And for this reason, it was the only game I've ever seen during the regular season that felt like a Game 7.
Yeah.
I've seen games that have felt like a Game 4, a Game 5, but never a Game 7. Yeah. I mean, you've never played in a regular season game that was that intense, right?
The only one that might come close is when Michael came back and we played the Pacers in Indiana. But the importance of the game wasn't nearly what it felt like in this Miami-Chicago game. It was more just the spectacle of Michael's return,
I'm glad you brought that up because I was trying to go through all the great regular season games that I could remember, and that was one of the first ones that jumped to mind. And you're right, it was more of the spectacle of him coming back, but at the same time, it was a pretty intense game. Like the fans were into it. I know the Pacers didn't want to lose. Like that must have felt like a playoff game.
It was. The intensity was incredible. But the fact that we lost didn't really matter that much. I mean, it did at the time, but not like this one. I mean, this one mattered because it affected NBA history.
Yeah.
But it was, to me, this was Miami's gift to the NBA. I mean, it's like it's February, it's March. People are more focused on, March Madness, baseball starting up. That's kind of the dead period in the NBA. And Miami gave us this gift of making the NBA relevant and giving us something to really be excited about in a normally kind of down period during the season. It was awesome.
What would have been a more fun team for Steve Kerr to play on, the 96-97 Bulls or this Miami team this year? Just for what you like to do, which is basically to jack wide open threes and make them.
Yeah,
I feel like on this team you might have threatened 60% 3-point shooting.
I don't know. I got pretty wide open looks back then. That was such an amazing team to play for and to play for Phil, and I can't imagine anything better. But these guys are having an awful lot of fun, and that's the beauty of it. When you start winning at this level, and you're actually playing against your own potential instead of your opponent. It's fantastic to be a part of.
And then every road game you have is a playoff game for that home team, and the crowd is sold out every time. Miami got to where we always thought they were going to get. It just took an extra 2 years, and it can't be forgotten that it happened because they stacked the deck. But at the same time, stacking the deck turned out to be pretty fun during the streak. So
a lot of fun, and in a way, I'm glad that it took them this long because it reminded us that basketball is a team sport, and you can't just throw guys together. It has to evolve over time. And even though they were able to win a title in their second season, it seemed to take all of 2 years to really, get to the point where they are now. And now it's really taking off.
And they have the right role players now too, which they did not have that first year. I wrote about something on Friday as part of that column was about the concept of adulthood with the NBA. And I do think that's one of the big things that's helped this year's team. Like you just look around, Chris Anderson accepted. You look around, they have adults. Shane Battier is somebody that could do a variety of things in his life. It didn't have to be basketball. Ray Allen's always been one of the most interesting players. LeBron's an adult. Wade's an adult. Bosh is an adult. Juwan Howard's been in the league for 20 years. Don't you feel like there's something to that when you stack a team with that many mature guys that had to have helped the streak?
No question. I mean, Phil Jackson hated to play rookies. And if you looked back at those teams, and then again at his Laker teams, the bench was filled with guys that you're talking about, just adults, veteran players who got it, who understood their roles, but who were really evolved. And I think that's a huge part of it. And we can go back to the one and done. There's a dynamic to the league that is so young that there are a lot of immature teams and teams that need to grow and need to grow together. But it takes time and it takes experience. And Miami has all of that now. They've got their whole team has pretty much seen it all, and they've done it together.
Are you in the camp of nobody's touching them this year? Are you in the camp of the West is really good, just wait, one of those West teams will be able to really battle them?
I'm in the camp that San Antonio could beat them if they're fully healthy and playing at the top of their game. I think when you look at Miami, there's a couple ways you can expose them. One is on the boards. Everybody knows, Indiana has pounded them on the offensive glass. But secondly, and maybe more importantly, you have to attack them. Their defense is so good, Miami's, that you have to attack them with the pass instead of the dribble. remember the Chicago series 2 years ago. Derrick Rose had nowhere to go. It wasn't a great passing team. They pretty much got destroyed. But Dallas 2 years ago, in the next series, they just picked them apart with their passing. It was like penetrate, kick again, kick a third time, and now you've got a wide open 3-point shooter. That's how you have to beat Miami. You got to force their defense to rotate multiple times because they're going to get to the first and second rotations. That's how fast they are. But if you have penetration like the Spurs do with Ginobili and Parker, if you have great 3-point shooting like they do across the board, and if you've got bigs, Duncan and Splitter, to me they have all the components to possibly beat Miami. But it's still going to be a tough test.
Well, what you just described rules out the Clippers completely, since that's the all-time dribble team.
Right.
They're not even running plays. And then, sadly, I think that rules out Oklahoma City for the most part, because that's not a team that swings the ball around either. That's either Westbrook's dribbling or Durant's dribbling.
Well, and that showed in the finals last year. Miami was able to contain them because everything was done off the dribble. And now that they don't have Harden, you've lost probably your best guy off the dribble for Oklahoma City. So, I don't think the Thunder can beat Miami.
Well, I guess the better question is, are the Thunder going to be there? Because I think they're going to, if Ty Lawson, assuming he's not, assuming he can get back in time at the rate he was before he got hurt, that's a team I just think they match up great with Oklahoma City.
I can't wait to see Denver in the playoffs. Denver's a team, I don't really root for teams. Just when you do the games, obviously you have to be impartial. It's hard not to cheer for Denver. What they've done with that organization, the way George Karl coaches, the way they play, the style, it's awesome to watch. And everyone has told them for the last 2 years, you can't win without Carmelo, or you can't win without a star player. But they're doing a pretty good job of it right now, and I can't wait to see what they do in the postseason. I think they're the most intriguing team heading into the playoffs.
I agree. And I think I wouldn't even do this just because it would be a fun thing to do. I really genuinely think they could beat Oklahoma City in round 2 if that's the matchup. And I'm trying to think of a team that would be a bad matchup for them. Even San Antonio, that you would think on paper the Spurs would just do the veteran thing and pick them apart. Every time I watch Denver, they always have a way of getting, you would think the other team would they'll just stick to their style. They're not going to get caught up in running with Denver. See, Denver just sucks you into their style. It's bizarre.
Yeah.
It's and the teams don't even want to play that way, and they end up playing that way. And that's what makes me think when, Barkley always says on the TNT show, and he's right. He's like, the playoffs, it slows down. You can't rely on that style in the playoffs because you can't play at that speed. And it's like, I'm not sure if that's true with Denver. Denver might be able to sustain that speed. So I'm going to be fascinated. Like you, I think they're the most interesting team other than Miami.
Yeah, but that's what makes it intriguing because normally the game does slow down. And if it does, then, then Lawson has to become the best player on the floor. He has to become Tony Parker, and he's gotten a lot better. He's getting there. And, Gallinari has to take the next step. And so those are all the questions that are going to have to be answered with Denver, but that's what's fun to watch and find out.
And the Grizzlies, who I've really been blown away by post Rudy Gay trade. I like that trade for them more than most people, but at the same time, I thought it was going to reduce their ceiling because I didn't think Prince had a lot left in the tank, and he's been pretty good for them. Yeah, I think he has more left than I thought, and for whatever reason, they just play better without Rudy Gay. I can't explain it, but I thought it was interesting that the players say that. Tony Allen's gone on the record and say, hey, now we're back to the team we were 2 years ago in the playoffs. It's like, well, the only difference is you don't have Rudy Gay like you didn't have 2 years ago. So it's obviously what he meant. Yeah. And it's a really smart team. It's like Gasol's really smart. Conley really runs a team smartly, and Prince is smart, and it's well coached, and I think they're dangerous. I don't know if they win the title, but I think they're dangerous.
Yeah. I like the trade for what it did for their future, just clearing up their books. But I thought they would miss Gay more than they do, mainly because, and I know his numbers aren't great, but one thing that's tough to quantify is at the end of a shot clock, he was the guy who could go get you a shot. And even though he didn't make a high percentage, he would get it, and they got some offensive rebounds off of what he could create. And now they don't really have that guy at the end of the shot clock who can create something. And that's, again, something that could be more exposed in the playoffs. We'll see. But I think the one thing it's done, that trade, is it's forced them to really recognize their strength, which is they're an inside-out team, and they can pound you with Gasol and Randolph. And Prince has played really well, so it's been a huge success.
And the Knicks are another team that's coming on lately. A little bit of fool's gold because they missed Miami, obviously. And 10 straight's nothing, that's 10 straight's impressive no matter what point of the season it's in. The one thing that's jumped out, though, other than the fact that they're getting really good Kenya Martin minutes, which I also feel him and Reggie Evans, I just don't, those guys are playing well lately. I don't trust either of them in the playoffs. But Carmelo, is rounding into form, like really playing as well as he's played probably. And
he's got 90 points in the last 2 games.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah. And in a series, he could be the best guy in a series, right? No matter who the other team is, which is the reason you trade for him in the first place.
Well, when they were great early in the year, he was at the 4, they had the floor spaced, and they were shooting the lights out from 3. And they took a dip when they had the injuries on the front line. They have so many old guys who went down. Kidd wore down. And when I watched them like a month ago when they were really in a funk, the ball just stopped all the time. And I watched some of the game last night. It seemed like the ball was moving again. They've got good spacing, good three-point shooting. Defensively, I just don't know. I thought Rashid was actually kind of a key to that team early in the season. He's so good defensively, even at whatever age he is now.
Yeah.
So I think they're going to miss him, but they're an intriguing team, and they've got a shot to absolutely make a run in the East. I don't think they can beat Miami, but I think they could get to the conference finals.
You don't think anybody in the East can beat Miami?
No.
I'm guessing.
I think Indiana and New York, could give them some trouble. Boston, just for old time's sake, could win a couple games, but I just don't see anybody strong enough to beat them 4 times. 96
Bulls went through the Eastern Finals, lost once. How many times does Miami lose in the Eastern Finals?
Well, can you ask me once I find out who the opponent is?
No, you just have to tell me right now.
You mean cumulatively through the playoffs or
through the Eastern Finals? First 3 rounds.
Eastern Finals. How many total playoff games will they lose? I say they lose 3.
3. Interesting.
What do you think?
Well, it was one of the interesting things about the 72-win season. If you had just swept Seattle, then I don't think anybody touches that season because you would have gone 87-11, right? 11 losses
so you're
for
saying since we only went 87-13,
I think you left the door open. But I still don't know what happened in 4 and 5 against Seattle.
Well, they were a good team. They were a great team. I mean, Gary Payton and Sean Kemp, and they had a hell of a team. And I think it's tough to sweep a team in the finals, especially because at that time, I mean, a team's playing at a high level, and they're obviously great. So I don't know. I mean, it was two road losses to a great team, but we came back and took care of business in Game 6, and that's all that matters.
Listen, when somebody goes 87-12, you're going to be feeling those 2 losses and be like, oh man, we should have closed them out in Game 4. That series was interesting though, because Kemp seemed to gain steam as it went along. And I remember leaving that series thinking like, well, 96 Bulls, one of the great teams ever, but man, that's Sean Kemp. Watch out for that guy.
Yeah.
That guy's headed places. And that was really it. That was his last great moment. But he went toe to toe with everybody in that series. So did Peyton.
He was unreal. Yeah, and Peyton was at the top of his game too. And George Karl, we all know what a great coach he is. So that was a pretty big time matchup.
I think that I personally think Miami loses either. I think they lose 2. I don't think they lose in the first 2 rounds.
Yeah.
unless they play Boston, which doesn't seem like it's going to happen in round one. But I think the Knicks they'll get the one game when Carmelo scores like 47.
Right.
And then they'll get the one game when they shoot 3 times as many free throws.
And there might be a game in there where, Battier, Chalmers, and Ray Allen go 1 for 15 or something from 3. You never know with a game like that and a team that relies so heavily on 3-point shooting. But I'll tell you this, I'd be shocked if they lost more than 3. I could see one game in each series, but beyond that, that would be surprising.
I'm not even going to ask you how the Celtics would do against them in a series because I don't want to get depressed. Who is your first team All-NBA?
Well, I mean, the obvious ones are LeBron and Durant.
Yep.
I think Kobe belongs there this year. He's been phenomenal. Carmelo, interesting. Yeah.
You think Carmelo has played
season, but overall he's been incredible.
So you have Carmelo playing his way on a first team All-NBA.
Yeah, and I mean, I haven't sat down and done this yet. I actually believe I cast a ballot pretty soon, but so I haven't really done my research, so I may be, and you have to do it by position too. I think my center would probably be Marc Gasol. He's my favorite center in the league. Mine too.
I think he's actually going to get it. It seems like most people finally realize that he's the best all-around center, which took a while.
He's fantastic. In the playoffs, though, he needs to know that he's the best and, try to dominate the game. Sometimes he's such a great passer. Sometimes he gets a little too pass-happy, and there are times when Memphis needs him to just be the man, and I think that's going to be necessary for him in the postseason.
You can't have Carmelo in your first team because you have LeBron and Durant. Those are your 2 forwards.
I know. There you go. Position-wise, it just doesn't work. So I need another
who's
guard.
Who's your second guard? Yeah.
So I guess Chris Paul. You could make a case for Parker. Either one of those guys probably deserves it. But
I have one of those. I have one of those ballots too.
Okay.
They actually sent me one this year. I was honored.
All right.
And I'm taking the maximum amount of time to think about it because to me, the second guard spot is still open. And you could even argue the first guard spot's open. If the Lakers don't make the playoffs, I'd have a hard time voting Kobe first team All-NBA.
I agree with that. I think you reward winning with these types of awards. So I'm open to changing my vote on that too.
I think Westbrook's in the conversation for me. I like the way that he's just balls to the wall every night.
Yeah.
And I think there were real concerns about whether he was going to pick up the slack without Harden, right?
Right.
Oh, he doesn't have his security blanket anymore. What's going to happen on the nights? But I think he's answered the call. That team has some issues, but it has nothing to do with him.
No, he plays hard.
Yeah.
And he is incredibly athletic. He belongs in there too. I mean, when you get down to the last few guys, it's really tough to pick one from the other.
Where does he rank on your fastest guys you've ever seen in person list?
Oh, boy.
We were arguing about this on Jalen and Magic and I were arguing about this.
Parker, Iverson.
Iverson, these. See, my fastest ever is LeBron.
Yeah.
I've never seen anybody cover 2/3 of the court faster than he did.
I agree.
And I actually would have Pippen on there too.
Yeah, the long strides.
Yeah, because the 6'8" guys you don't think is the super fast guys, but they can cover 2/3 of the court in 6 steps.
Yeah.
But I think Westbrook is up there for me. He's
for
just
sure.
Full head of steam. It's like nothing you've ever seen.
Yeah, it's scary.
Steve Kerr, as always, a pleasure. We will talk to you during the playoffs.
We'll turn the page to the NBA next time we get together.
So it's you and Marv in the playoffs on the road for 3 rounds?
Yeah. And then, Reggie will be in there too for the conference finals. He'll be with Kevin Harlan the first 2 rounds. And conference finals, we do the East this year, and it'll be all 3 of us. So I can't wait. It's going to be awesome. And I mean, just to go from the NCAA tournament right into the NBA playoffs, I love basketball, so I've got the greatest gig going. It's awesome.
We're traveling for the Western Finals and the Finals this year. So I'm rooting for the Western Finals solely based on the cities. So I'm all in on the Nuggets. I love Denver. I want to spend a couple days in Denver.
Yeah.
Come on, Nuggets.
Let's go. Well, now you know. I mean, I've been cheering that way for years. I just don't tell anybody.
Well, there's one. Listen, whatever series would be great, but if it's Oklahoma City, San Antonio, there's no direct flight somehow between those two cities. So it's like you hear that and you're like, okay, well, now I know who I'm going to be secretly rooting for in the second round.
Come on, direct flight cities, you can do it.
Come on, direct flight cities with places I could walk around downtown. It's terrible. I guess that's what happens when you're in the media.
You get jaded big time.
Steve Kerr, thanks for the time. A pleasure. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, Bill. Thanks.
All right, take care.
So I get to sign off. Whoa!
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at Podcenter at ESPNradio.com.
Peace out.
Geico presents Strange Savings Stories. Astronomers detected an interstellar transmission. It stated, Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more. The implications were staggering. Was the cosmos telling us we could all save hundreds on car insurance with Geico? Or did their radar merely pick up a signal from the nearby Rufus and Clyde's morning show? We may never know.
Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.